to me, it's striking, and I think it's really a really good way to put it into perspective. So the Rock Island Arsenal Museum is one of 30 Army museums that operates across the country, and then 2 actually outside the United States in Germany and Korea. Every one of those 30 museums has something in their collection stamped RIA. What that means, if you really want to break it down, is that everywhere the Army has been, Rock Island Arsenal has been. And every one of those products, at some point, someone from this area touched it.
Where do you find a family of communities connected by the storied Mississippi River, where young explorers and dreamers, investors and entrepreneurs thrive? Where can you connect with real people living and creating in a place that's as genuine as it is quirky? QC, that's where.
Welcome to QC, That's Where. I'm your host, Katrina, and I am so excited to be here with the very hardworking Patrick Allie, the director of the Rock Island Arsenal Museum. Patrick, hello, how are you?
I'm doing well, Katrina. It's great to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for spending the time, and I really do want to note how significant spending a little bit of time on this is, because I know you are just being pulled in a million directions right now because you are in the middle of a massive museum renovation.
Yeah, it's been, the past few weeks have been an absolute whirlwind of activity. Within the past 5 weeks, we've seen the museum go from a giant empty room to being fully populated with walls and over 200 artifacts and digital media interactives and everything you can possibly imagine that a museum could have. We have populated about 10,500 square feet with brand new state-of-the-art exhibits.
I'm so excited to hear about what is to become of the museum, and to set the stage for listeners. The Rock Island Arsenal Museum originally opened back in 1905. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So the museum is actually the Army's second oldest museum. We opened to the public on July 4th of 1905. We've been on Rock Island since that time. We've occupied a couple different buildings, but we've been in our current location since about 1948.
So through the years, how many reimaginings it's had, construction or anything, expansions like that?
Yeah. So all museums evolve and develop, whether that's as changes come to their collections or changes in what the public wants to learn about or what the museum's mission has been. The mission of the Rock Island Arsenal Museum has always been to tell the history of Rock Island Arsenal and its work and its contributions to the Army. So that has always been a constant throughout the entire roughly 118-year history of the museum. But what's really fascinating, the museum's actually only shut down 3 times in its existence. And each of those shutdowns involved basically a reimagining of the space. The first was during World War I. We shut down to make space for war manufacturing, and they packed the museum up and put it into storage. And then in 1919, they unpacked it and set it up differently with some different focus again on all of the stuff that we did during World War I. We would shut down again during World War II, again to clear out space for manufacturing and for storage and things like that. And then the museum would reopen in its current location in Building 60, where we are today, again, completely reimagined, telling not just the story of World War I, but also World War II. And then our third major closure, which I think really puts an emphasis on how impactful COVID-19 was to the country, to the world, that was our next major closure. This is the longest period that the museum has been closed since World War II. And that was in response to a world war. This was in response to a global pandemic. And as part of that closure, and it actually, it wasn't planned, obviously, for us to be closed for COVID, but it kind of lined up pretty well. So we had some time to turn inwards and focus and really think about reimagining the space. And so, the new museum is once again reimagined with a greater focus again on what our mission is, which is to tell the history of the Arsenal, its commands, the Army in this region, the products, the people, the processes, all of these things that the mission of the museum holds us to. That's what the new exhibits really reflect.
So for those who may have been to the museum, in the last 30 years, say, what is maybe going to be the biggest change up that they'll notice coming into the new space?
Oh my gosh, it'll be completely different. So, we've had some walkthroughs for some various folks here on the Arsenal that have been here and saw the previous iteration. I mean, it is a complete floor to ceiling renovation. I mean, there are structures that were in the museum that no longer exist. All of the finishes on the inside of the museum all the old finishes are gone. All new flooring. The walls went from white to a gray. The ceiling went from white to a black. I mean, it's a completely different space than what folks would have seen previously. In terms of the exhibits themselves, we took a different interpretive approach. Previously, it was kind of thematic. So you learned about some of the families on the Arsenal and leather manufacturing and firearms. Guns were a big part of the displays in the museum. We kind of took a step back and went with a chronological approach for the reimagining of the museum that really takes you from about 1805 all the way up through what we do here on the island today. That was a major question that I was receiving from our visitors, was what do you guys do here? Because, we're the place where the public comes. We're the front porch of the Arsenal, for all intents and purposes. And so we need to be the place where all of the amazing work that's happening, where that story's told. And so that was a part of my thinking when I got into really writing and structuring and outlining what the new exhibits were going to be, was to also tell the historic aspect, but bring it all the way up to today, because what we're doing today has a major impact on national defense. Most people don't know that, but at the end of the day, it will really, I think, for folks that saw the museum prior to the closure, it can be a bit overwhelming with the changes, but all of the feedback I've received to date from those individuals that saw it in its previous iteration has been positive. We took a lot of the favorite stories, all the favorite interpretation, and put it and wove it into an interpretation that tells a deeper and broader story about the history of the Arsenal.
So interesting with like the format change up, like before it was, topical and now it's chronological. Does that kind of open the door for you guys to just continue to build on it without having to maybe like disrupt stuff from the 1800s that you're going to display?
Yeah, no, that's actually a great point. So our designer, who actually works for the Center of Military History, she designed it in such a way that there is room for adding on to the story. And just the way she broke up the space. So we do have room, if one of the units or commands on the installation has something they really want to show off, we'll have a space for them to do that. We have the built-in space. So we really put a lot of thought, not just into the text and the image selection and the artifact selection, but also just how the space is broken up and how we plan to use it in the future. No, we're actually working on developing a secondary temporary exhibit space that'll serve as a place where we can do, host traveling exhibits, do temporary smaller exhibits that are related to commemorations or anniversaries or just things we want to show off from our storerooms. It'll also be a classroom space, really just kind of a catch-all space that we'll be able to utilize. That's almost a phase 2 that we're looking at right now. But thinking ahead, trying to imagine ways that we can keep the museum fresh, even as it's basically brand new, starting to think of those out years.
So kind of like you said, like one thing at a time, get the museum set up and running, which opens June 29th, 2023, coming up very soon.
Very soon.
We're excited. So at Visit Quad Cities, the Rock Island Arsenal as a whole is definitely a point of interest for, residents and visitors alike. People come into our destination centers and they want to know where it is, what can we see there, how to get on. People who come on need a visitor's pass, which if you've gone through the process is very easy to get. It is very important to get. But we love to be able to, showcase what it is and its history. And, it's such a long-standing and important asset to this nation and, let alone our destination. in the late 60s, the Rock Island Arsenal Museum was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which is something amazing to be able to share with our community. What like elements of, those major milestones can people expect to see in the new iteration of the museum?
Yeah, absolutely. So we tell the holistic history of the arsenal within the new interpretation. So again, everything from 1805 to today, really pulling out a number of different stories, and milestones is kind of interesting conceptually, because milestones can be seen in a variety of different ways. So you have those milestones that are related to place. So things like being listed on the National Historic Registry, which really kind of gives you a sense of how important this island is.
Yes.
Because it's listed, we are obligated. They have to maintain the buildings we're in. The building the museum is in was built finished in 1867. I mean, we are a very historic structure, so we're literally living in history, within the museum itself. But within the museum, we really touch on milestones in terms of almost societal milestones in a lot of ways, and milestones in terms of the kinds of things we're doing. So I'll start with the societal ones. So one of the really cool things that I was able to pull into the new exhibits was the changes of the workforce over time. So as women came into the workforce, and you start to see that really in large numbers, turn of the century leading up to World War I, and then World War I hits, and you're having to pull on a demographic that previously largely didn't work outside the home, and now they're working jobs producing things at the arsenal. You have stories of people of color moving into the workforce and the different roles that they play, even over the span of like 20 years. So during World War I, Black workers at the arsenal were largely working janitorial positions, but by World War II, you have them working in skilled labor positions as machinists. You also have women of color working as machinists, and those sorts of changes. And then also just looking at all of the technological advancements that have occurred at Rock Island Arsenal, different kinds of weapons development, things that impacted, the kinds of equipment that soldiers are utilizing today. These are all different ways that Rock Island has impacted the Army, and marked its own way kind of in that larger Army history, and set itself apart.
Interesting, kind of on the societal front, like, the Arsenal has very like sensitive and important work that you guys are doing on a global scale. That being said, it is important for our community to know and be able to see that like you're all part of this place. The Arsenal is a place that is not just invite only. Anyone and everyone should and can come on and take a look at, the attractions that are on the Arsenal, obviously the museum coming up later this month, because it is such an integral part of our history. And, it just shows the story and the scope of how the nation has changed, all the way down to the military.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. In addition, not in addition, but really parallel to it, we're telling the story of the Arsenal. Really, that's the Quad Cities history, or the Tri-Cities as it existed before that.
Sure.
Right? So it's really a thread you'll also see throughout the new museum, is the fact that yes, this is an Army story, but it's really an Army story, hand in hand with a Quad Cities story. This is just as much of an important part of the Quad Cities history as John Deere or anything else related to Quad Cities history. We are a part of that. And the citizens that have called this region home for, 100, 200, 150 years, this is their story. And one thing to me, it's striking, and I think it's a really good way to put it into perspective. So the Rock Island Arsenal Museum is one of 30 Army museums that operates across the country, and then 2 actually outside the United States in Germany and Korea. Every one of those 30 museums has something in their collection stamped RIA. What that means if you really want to break it down, is that everywhere the Army has been, Rock Island Arsenal has been. And every one of those products, at some point, someone from this area touched it. Someone whose relative worked here, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, their grandfather, great-grandfather, had a part in making that thing that a soldier is carrying with him on the battlefield. For some, that was, especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice, they died alongside things stamped RIA, things that were made by this community, made in this community. And I think that that's really powerful if you really step back and think about it. Just the impact from that standpoint, that, this small island, 946 acres in the middle of the Mississippi, and things made here are spread across the globe. And that's meaningful. And not only are those items spread across the globe, the people that made those items are from here. They call this place home. And so that's also one of the threads, certainly we try to pull through on the new exhibits, is that, again, this is a Quad City story. We are very unique as far as Army museums go, because most of our Army museums tell a branch history or tell the history of a specific unit who could have members from across the country. Or if you're the artillery school, people from across the country come through there. But we tell a very, very regional story, and then how that region impacts the larger military. And so I think it makes us very unique, and it makes the story very personal to a lot of people. The fact anytime I go out and talk to the public, I'm running into relatives who say, "Oh yeah, you showed a slide of so and so. I'm there. That's our great aunt or great grandma, or that's really cool."
Yeah.
To be able to make those connections, and I think those connections are really what helps root the entire interpretation of the museum and the new approach to the museum. Is it makes it very personal, and that's really important. Is making that experience personal for every one of our visitors.
Patrick, how long have you been the director of the museum?
So I've been here, it'll be 5 years in August. So not too long. And most of that, about half of that I've spent working on this project.
Yeah.
So this has really been a big part of that. And we've been working on this since, let me think, I actually started writing exhibit script and selecting artifacts and selecting images in, I guess it would have been May of 2020. That's really when we first started this process.
Okay.
And so it roughly from about May 2020 to June 2023. So really about a 3-year, almost a full 3-year process from flash to bang, as they would say.
So your time so far in the role has been very unique to, directors past because of the, obviously because of the pandemic pause. And you really jumped right in quickly into the reimagination. What is your background that led you into the director spot?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So as far as museums go, my dad actually ran an Army museum for years.
Okay.
And so I grew up in Army museums, but I struck out on my own path. I worked for the National Archives in Kansas City for a short time. I worked at an airline museum there as well. Education-wise, I have a bachelor's in history, naturally, and a master's in museum studies. Before I came here, I was actually the military and arms curator for the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis. And interestingly enough, the project I was in charge of before I came here was actually a complete renovation of their military museum in downtown St. Louis. So I had literally just come off a project doing exactly what I'm doing, actually changing an organization and reinterpreting a museum that had not changed really since about 1938. So this was like new compared to that. But you have the same pitfalls. You have the same sort of, expectations when you're dealing with what folks want to see in the museum. So it was actually a very natural kind of stepping back into those shoes after doing my work down in St. Louis, a couple of years, just kind of keeping the museum going, getting feedback from visitors and running programming, and then jumping right into that new renovation here. So basically like 2 renovations in like the course of like 6 years of my career, major ones. So that's
Yeah.
kind of my background in a nutshell. It's really exciting work. I really enjoy what I do. It'll be very interesting once the museum opens on June 29th to be able to like take a seat and not have to think about a complete renovation or a project of that scale. There's plenty of other moving parts, but as far as that goes, I can at least sort of put that to bed for a little while.
What will you renovate next?
I know, right? Oh man, don't even say that. Don't even say that. It's a fun process, don't get me wrong, but I will be ready to put that part behind me and start thinking about the community engagement stuff and looking at the outdoors and future smaller exhibits, smaller ones, not big, massive 10,000 square foot exhibits.
No, I mean, it's exciting. It will be exciting for you to be able to see it all come to fruition and be able to go, look at whole scale. Wow, this actually, years of work, this actually came together. People are here learning, enjoying, engaging. That's gonna be amazing.
Oh, and it is, and I'm already getting some of it. So as I'm walking people through, the phrase I love to hear, and I'm hearing it time and time again, is I was walking through and I learned something, or this is what I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And it's like, perfect. Then I am doing my job.
Yeah.
If especially for folks who've been around the Arsenal for a long time, for them to come in and be able to learn something about the history of this place and its impact on the Army, that's huge. That's me doing my job. And every time I hear that, I'm thrilled. I really am.
If you had to pick out one piece from the museum, whether it's, something written, an artifact, the sky's the limit, do you have a favorite element?
It's hard to pick. That's always the question, though. I should prepare myself for that.
Have it ready. No.
No, right, exactly. Probably my favorite piece in the exhibit is actually a piece that is a community favorite. So I get asked to when I've been talking about the exhibit, which I've been doing now for what seems like forever. But when I'm out in the public and I'm talking with people, a lot of people are like, they remember two things. These are two things I get asked about. One is the firearms and the guns, and we have woven some of those through the interpretation. It's not what it was, but it's actually a better experience. And the second one is our horse. So we have a taxidermied horse, and this is actually great because she has a connection with where I came from before I came here. So it's a taxidermied horse. She was purchased by the Arsenal in the 1890s to test fit harness. Rock Island Arsenal was the world's largest producer of horse harness, saddles, and tack in the early 20th century. No one made more than we did. And so there was a whole team of these taxidermied horses that they would test fit the harness on. Now, in 1904, we have the St. Louis World's Fair, or the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, for the proper name of it. And so at the St. Louis World's Fair, every government of the world sent out the latest and greatest of their technology. Well, in 1904, the latest and greatest technology was horse-drawn artillery. And so so all of the horses at Rock Island Arsenal, because we're only about driving 3.5 hours, obviously back in 1904 would take a little longer, but we're very close to St. Louis, and so the Army gathered up these taxidermy horses and sent them down to St. Louis, and they were part of the Army's display. So between the World's Fair and when they came back, the museum was open, and so the horse came into, or the team of horses came back into the collection. Now, we only have one that remains, and she's holding up well for 1890s taxidermy.
Wow.
But the connection for me, which is cool, is I worked at the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, which has the largest collection related to the St. Louis World's Fair. They have a dedicated gallery that they're currently working on redoing right now. And so it's kind of cool to have that connection. But that's one piece that I always get asked about. They're like, what about the horse? Is the horse coming back? Yes, the horse is coming back.
Oh, wow.
So she's installed now. She's looking pretty good. The new digs surrounding her certainly help her out quite a bit. But that's probably one of my favorite pieces, just because she tells a lot of stories just in one artifact. And for me, as a material culture person, as a museum person,
Mhm.
having a three-dimensional artifact that can tell multiple stories across time is really important and really cool. And there are generations of school kids in the Quad Cities who are adults now who remember that horse, trust me, because they talk about it. And so it was really great to get that piece back in there and be able to share that story again.
So when people come in June 29th and beyond for years to come, what should people know looking at it as far as how many hands went into making this a reality? How many hours of labor, just the scale of work that
Yeah.
really to reimagine, put this together.
Yeah, so it's probably hard to think of it in hours, but just to kind of give you a quick rundown of the process and how it kind of went through. So I told you I started writing exhibit script in May of 2020. I turned that over to our designer in September of 2020, and she took a full year designing the space. So she did all the graphic layouts, designed all of the casework, really putting the pen to paper, establishing the graphic identity, all of those things that a museum requires. Then I worked with her hand in hand on the development of those, placement, what graphics I wanted to use. And that's one thing in the new exhibit that we really tried to do is we have a really vast collection of photographs, historic images of the arsenal and its operations and the people working here. And so, we really tried to lean heavily on large, wall-sized graphics so you can really see the detail on what these guys are doing or women are doing in their work. And so, working through layouts and things like that took about a year. And then after that was a year of basically getting the exhibit fabricator under contract to actually start producing the things. So producing the walls, producing the media interactives, making the casework. They showed up on site, would have been end of April, and they just left last week. So they were here transforming the space, putting walls up, putting lighting up, putting artifacts into cases. All of our 250 plus artifacts have custom mounts for every single one of them. So they were fitting those and what they call faux painting them to match the color, so they kind of disappear in the case. So I would say over the past 5 weeks, they've been I would say, like 75-hour, 80-hour weeks. So to put hours on it, this last bit of it has been quite intensive, to say the least.
Oh my gosh.
But it's a process, and it's been a really great process, from working with the designer on the layout of the exhibits, to working with the fabricators, to working with the digital interactive developers, because we have a number of digital interactives where people can really dive deep into different subjects within the space. So yeah, it's been an intensive, roughly 3 years, but it's all coming together. It's all right there. We're probably at about 98% right now. We have a few punch list items, but it's really come full circle.
We're excited for, obviously the summer opening date is going to be great because 2023, we have a huge summer coming up. June 29th is just days before the John Deere Classic starts, for instance, where we'll have tons of out-of-towners coming in, huge event. And then RAGBRAI is ending in Davenport this summer. That'll be another opportunity. Every opportunity we have to tout and, really brag about the museum to people coming from out of town who may not have ever heard of the Rock Island Arsenal. We want to be able to send them there and suggest that they go there. So really great timing, whether or not it was planned that way. It's just great.
Well, in all fairness, actually the date, I had originally hoped to open a couple of days later, but as schedules go. But no, this is actually the closest we could get to opening, as close as we could to the original opening date of the museum, which was July 4th of 1905. So
okay.
It ends up working out for everyone since we went with that date. But that's that was the driving force behind kind of that end of June, early July opening. But hey, it works out for everyone.
Yeah, no, this is fabulous. We're very excited. And thank you so much, Patrick, for giving us the sneak peek of what's to come. Definitely If you have seen it before, it's a whole new thing. So definitely make sure that you get there once it's open.
Yeah, no, it's been great talking with you, Katrina, and being able to share, again, this real labor of love for me, to be able to create this brand new experience for our visitors, whether those are folks that live in the area or folks coming through our out of town visitors. So I think it'll really be something that the Quad Cities can take pride in. It'll be one of the newest museums in the Quad Cities that we'll be able to tap at for a few years to come, I'm sure.
You'll be able to hold the title of oldest and newest at the same
time. That's right. That's perfect.
So at this point, Patrick, I think I would like to throw it back to you and have you fill in the blank. QC, that's where
the community takes pride in its Army history.
Absolutely. Patrick, thank you so much. And if you want to learn more about the Arsenal, how to visit, how to get a pass, how to see its attractions, learn about its history, go to visitquadcities.com and you can search Arsenal. We've got a whole listing there to help you out. Also follow Rock Island Arsenal on social media. They have updates there that were very, very helpful. So thank you so much again, Patrick, and I'll let you get back to your busy work with the museum.
And thanks, Katrina. It's great talking to you today.
Thanks for listening to QC, That's Where, a podcast powered by Visit Quad Cities. Text Visit QC to 38314 for insider events, activities, and updates sent straight to your phone. That's VISITQC, one word, to 38314. Message and data rates may apply.